The latest tensions between the two countries come at a time of debate about how countries wield their power. At Davos, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney described as a rupture in the international system, saying large countries are weaponizing economic integration to get what they want. And so to our next guest, who argues the US has been doing just that against Iran, Henry Farrell is the professor at Johns Hopkins University and co-author of Underground Empire, How America Weaponized the World Economy. Professor, very grateful to have you. Thank you. As I read your views, you know, the Carney speech, which was a turning point in many ways, was basically saying we all know the realpolitik of it, that the big countries do what they want. And we've all accepted that for our common benefit. The difference now is the weaponization of that acceptance.
It's wonderful to be with you, Richard, and I think that that is exactly right. Carney talks about the ways in which we used to, for a long time, we have known that the world economy was indeed run according to principles where the strong did what they wanted, but there was a certain degree of give and hypocrisy associated with it, and that has gone. And now what we're seeing is the very naked weaponization of the underlying infrastructural systems through which the United States is capable of really shaping global politics. And so we see countries like Canada, like the European Union, and indeed Iran trying to figure out what to do in this much more difficult and much more uncertain world.
It's almost a sort of an exam question. Which is worse, the hypocrisy of the living the lie, as Havel put it, living in the lie, as Havel put it, or the reality of the realpolitik of you actually know what's going on? Which is worse? Discuss.
Okay, so I think that the way that I think about it is that hypocrisy, there's a famous saying that it is the homage that vice pays to virtue, but also hypocrisy can be the way in which virtue to some extent chains vice down and forces it to behave in ways which it otherwise might not behave. So I think in a world where the United States was much more committed to a variety of different rights, that this was a world in which US allies could rely on it for some things. Countries such as Iran could also hope or believe that there would be certain things that the United States would not do. And we're now in a world where a lot of those have really just gone out the window.
Right. But here's the point. Let's take India tonight. India reaches the US deal with the US on tariffs by agreeing not to buy Russian oil. Classic case of what you are talking about. Is the problem here not the use of force, the weaponization, but the capricious nature by which it seems to be at the whim of the one man, the president? There's no process leading to the decision.
So I think that's a lot of what is happening. And certainly if you looked back, as Abe Newman, my co-author, and I did in Underground Empire, if you look back over the last couple of decades, you will see a lot of process that was associated with these decisions. And now we see a world in which the Trump administration seems to be jumping from one to the other thing without any huge degree of consistency. But I think that that is also a problem for the Trump administration, because with the United States in the old configuration, you used to at least have some hope that the United States would stick to a deal. And now Trump, I think, whether he'll stick to this deal with India or not, who knows? It may depend on who he talks to 2 weeks from now, whether he wakes up in a bad mood, whether somebody says something mean about him on social media.
So finally, on this point, let's assume we have this for the next 3 years. Whatever comes after cannot, I would suggest, put the genie back in the bottle. We can't go back to the old way because, and I think you would probably agree, because trust has been destroyed. Therefore, what is the new modus operandi between large powers and middle to small powers?
So I think that that is absolutely right. And certainly the Biden administration, after Trump's first go, did think that they could come back and that everybody would welcome them with open arms. And they discovered that this was absolutely not the case. So I think that whoever comes in after Trump, whether this be a different kind of Republican or whether the Democrats win back the presidency, is going to have to confront a world in which people will not trust the United States, in which they're building their own systems, and in which I think we're going to see, for example, Europe, China, middle powers such as Canada, building more and more their own systems and being extremely distrustful of wanting to get too entangled with what the United States has built.
Professor Henry, if I may call you by your first name, Henry, let's agree that we will talk more over the next 3 years so I can get your perspective on exactly how this is all playing out. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm very grateful. Thank you.